So here you are trying to learn about ventilator graphics, and it's just not sinking in. Well, good news! I'll simplify it and explain the importance of checking out ventilator graphics. First, let's start with the pressure volume graph. A normal pressure volume graph should look like a football and should be positioned in the center like this. Now let's observe some things. First, this represents inhalation. And notice that at the end of inhalation, we have two measurements, the PIP and the volume. This side represents exhalation. The patient's exhalation should return back to zero. What if the graph looks like this? Well, this normally means that you're giving too much volume, and the pressure in the lung is drastically increased, and that is not good. So what should you do? Well, you should decrease your volume down to this inflection point so that it looks like a football again. Well, what if this waveform is not in the center? What if it has shifted or moved to the right? What can cause that? A shift to the right normally means that the lung has gotten worse. There's a decrease in compliance. For example, if the patient is on volume control and the lung shrinks, the ventilator still will give the same volume, but notice that the pressure inside the lung has increased. A similar thing happens in pressure control. When the lung shrinks, the ventilator has to keep the same pressure, but notice now that the volume decreases. This shows us that the lung has decreased in compliance, and notice that the graph still shifted to the right. Notice how I haven't even looked at an x-ray or auscultated breath sounds or even gotten a blood gas, and yet I can still see that once the graph shifts to the right, this patient's lung has decreased in compliance. Here's another thing you can assess. Does the patient need more PEEP? In this example, notice how the lung has already begun to inhale, but no volume has entered the lung, only until it reached this pressure here. So here's what you can do. Add PEEP to this level here. So let's recap. This is inhalation and this is exhalation, and we want it to return back to baseline. We don't want a beak because that means the lung is being overdistended. And if you see a beak, decrease the volume if they're in volume control, or decrease the pressure if they're on pressure control. And if the graph shifts to the right, the patient's lung compliance is decreasing. Well, what if you see this? This means the patient attempted to trigger the breath, so the graph naturally went into the negative pressure side. At this point, the ventilator sensed the patient's effort and decided to give a controlled positive pressure breath. This happens in the assist control mode. And what if the graph looks like this? Well, this is a positive pressure side and this is a negative pressure side. The only way to get the graph on this side during inhalation is if this is a pure, spontaneous, negative pressure breath. There's a few more things we could have looked at, but this should be enough to get you comfortable to start looking at ventilator graphics. And please be sure to look at my other waveform tutorials so that you can learn how to make adjustments and treat the patient safely.